Today on Locked On Red Wings, our biggest takeaways from the Traverse City Prospects Tournament.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast, while Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, guys, we're just going to simply break down our biggest takeaways from the Prospects Tournament. Now, obviously, all you guys know already. Hi, by the way, Scotty. How you doing?
Hey, man. What's up?
How was your weekend?
It was really good until 1 o'clock on Sunday.
I would say probably about 4:30 on Sundays when it went downhill.
And then, no, mine got better at about 4 o'clock on Sunday, personally. And then, yeah, it was just that 3-hour window there. And Sunday afternoon kind of sucked. But the rest of it was fine.
Cool.
How about you?
It was good. Got the boat out of the water on Saturday.
Nice.
Got it done in like 3 hours, which is like record time.
Nice.
I came back home and relaxed.
Good for you, man.
Thanks, man. But yeah, as you guys know, Red Wings lost all 3 games of the Prospects Tournament. After the first one was a relatively close game, the next 2 were, well, all 3 were close games, but they became scoring fests, so to speak. 10-7 loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets, 6-5 loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs Prospects, who were like oddly wearing like Adidas practice jerseys as their uniforms. I don't know what the deal was. I mean, who cares? It's the Prospects Tournament, but I saw that. I was like, they're not even going to let them pretend they're the real Maple Leafs for 4 days. So, but yeah, I mean,
you have to earn it.
We're not going to like sit here and break down these games because the games don't matter. Like, it literally does not matter who wins and loses these games. It's just a showcase. But there are takeaways to be had from them nonetheless. So we're going to give you our biggest takeaways from the weekend rather than kind of just like break down first, second, third period of each individual game. That just makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, that's probably what we should be doing for like all of these games anyways, right? Like this is not a weekend in which you look at the win-loss record and like if we could have gone 3-0 and like that wouldn't have been the story of the weekend. The story would have been the individual performances of, player X, Y, and Z. So like it's that's just like what the whole purpose of these games is, to look at individual performances from players, final score. Really, and like it's easy to say that because we lost a lot this weekend. Like,
right.
Like genuinely, like I'm not trying to use like revisionist history and be like, oh, we went 0-3, so I'm going to say this. Like, we could have gone 3-0, and I'd be saying the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you want to lead off, man? I mean, we talking about biggest takeaways of the weekend. I mean,
do you want to bury the lead or start with the lead? I'll leave that up to you.
I feel like we'd be remiss to bury the lead. I think it's going to be what people want us to talk about the most. So it's kind of a two-parter, 2 sides of the same coin, and they're tied together. The defense all weekend sucked. And Sebastian Cossa also was not very good all weekend. And I kept waiting for him to have that game where he was like on. Never happened. And, like I said, they're 2 sides of the same coin. The defense certainly didn't help out Sebastian Cossa at all. But, Jan Bednar went out there in the game against Toronto and, according to Point Streak, at least, if it's accurate, made 29 saves. And then Cossa came in and made, 12 saves on 17 shots. Although that math doesn't seem to add up to me because there were 6 goals in this game and there were no empty netters. So if I'm 12 plus 5 equals 17, so where's that 6th goal?
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I don't know. I don't know. But, we're also talking about like I don't know. It's wait, was there not an empty netter? I don't remember.
No, the 6th goal happened. The 6th goal for Toronto happened right after the Red Wings tied it up 5-5.
Oh, you're right.
With 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
So like it was just a soft shot from the outside from the point.
Yeah.
And
I mean, whatever. Yeah. Exactly.
We're digressing at this point.
It doesn't really matter.
My point being is that Sebastian Cossa and the defense were all weekend long not very good.
No, they correct. That is absolutely right. The defense, I think on Saturday you had texted me and you were like, "What is this game?" And I think my response was, "Defense is optional." And like that's just really what the epitome of Saturday's game was for sure. The blue line was really not effective defensively in this entire weekend. It's something that we talked about on Friday's episode where like, hey, the blue line wasn't great, on the defensive side of the puck. And then that transitioned into the weekend and it got significantly worse than it even was, on Friday's episode. So yeah, we're talking about a really, really rough defensive performance from this team. And obviously that becomes highlighted by goaltending. And, Saturday was just a bleep show. What did they end up giving up? 10? That was just, whatever. Not whatever, but like that was just, again, like pretty much everything that was put on net went in at one point there. And the second, like right after, like the second half of the game had started. And then Sunday, not really too much different with Cossa in that. And so I think we were a lot more, I don't know the word I want to use. We weren't too harsh on Kossa's game one performance. And like he had only allowed a couple of goals, but he got beat. We talked about it. He got beat pretty good on those goals. But like, they were all 3-on-1s or whatnot. Like they were all like big on rushes. And it's like, all right, like you can kind of live with that. Like he's a prospect. And the only time he really got beat was on like complete, like really bad turnovers. And then the rest of the weekend, that was just not the case. He was getting beat on everything. A lot of people were pointing at just like lateral movement in general, just like seemed to get beat if there was a pass in the crease several times from one side of the crease to the other. Like, I don't know. It was not reassuring. Yeah, it definitely wasn't performances that you look at and you get, pumped up with optimism about the future. That being said, we're going to reiterate, like, this is still the prospects tournament after, a summer off. Like if he goes out there wherever he starts, I guess we can assume for right now it's Grand Rapids, but if he goes out there and puts up 3 solid performances to start off the season, people will forget about what he did in the prospects tournament. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? Like in the end, what happens during the regular season is really going to tell a tale, but you can't look at this weekend and say it's not disheartening. And like, again, you want to reiterate, he was playing behind some really bad defense and some really bad turnovers all weekend long. But I mean, there's no amount of bad defense that excuses 5 goals in 5 minutes or the 6 goals that he allowed in this game. It's just like, it just gets really frustrating after a while. I mean, the Red Wings had, I think, a 3-0 lead against the Columbus Blue Jackets. No, 4-1 lead against Columbus Blue Jackets before they scored 7 straight. Now, like I said, 5 were against Sebastian Cossa, and then the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, like I said, it was Jan Bednar kept it to a shutout until it was Sebastian Kossa's turn, and then Cossa gets in net and 6 goals get scored. So, well, you do try and not read too heavily into the prospects tournament. You do, like, your worry level does kind of peak a little bit. He struggled a lot early last year in Grand Rapids and with the walleye before finding his groove and was absolutely phenomenal all the way through the end of the season. You thought, okay, well, maybe now he's finally figured it out, just to come into the prospects tournament and struggle again. And the thing about the prospects tournament too is, like, and we talked about it. Yeah, they're like guys who have all kinds of different experience on the board. Like we joked about how Elmer Soderblom had 21 games at the NHL level, and he's playing with Nate Danielson, who played for the Brandon Wheat Kings last year. So was like taking high school courses 6 months ago. Yeah. Right, exactly. But if Cossa can't come in and look strong in an environment filled with guys who like are 2 to 3 years his junior, there's part of you in the back of your mind where while you're telling yourself, don't be hyperbolic, don't give into, despair yet about this Cossa situation. There's a part of you that's like, oh, that's not great. And it's okay to tell yourself that it's not great. Yeah. I mean, we can keep talking about it, but like, there's a difference between like he wasn't good this weekend, and like we all know that he wasn't good this weekend, versus like this dude's gonna suck forever. Like there's a difference between like those sides of the aisle for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we're talking more about, what else stood out to us over the weekend when we come back. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Jase Medical. Got to click the right button. There we go. Everyone should be empowered for them to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides five life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code /LOCKEDON. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are giving you our biggest takeaways from the weekend and the prospects tournament. Scotty, when talking about the defense, this is something I want to bring up too. I saw some tweets being like, oh, maybe the Red Wings defensive prospects aren't as good as we thought. They keep getting burned all the time. And, my response to that is like, did you look at the Red Wings roster this weekend for their defense? Like, of the guys who were there, the biggest one to note is William Wallander, which is a pretty big defensive prospect. And he had a pretty decent tournament on his own right. There was obviously a couple bad turnovers that led directly to goals, but he looked good at other times as well. But you're missing some of your biggest defensive prospects, namely, obviously, Simon Edmondson and Albert Johansson, who were not there for the prospects tournament. I mean, after that, it's Antti Tuomisto and a lot of guys that most casual Red Wings fans probably haven't heard of. So before you hit the panic button on the Red Wings defensive depth at the prospects, like take a deep look at that and go, who was really there for the Red Wings this prospects tournament? Because it wasn't really anyone of note.
Yeah, you're 100% right. If you look up and down the blue line and what the lines were and the pairings were for the weekend, it's not like we had every single one of our best defensive prospects out there. And yeah, I mean, again, like this is a 3-game sample size in September. Coming off of the off season, like it's very hard to. This is like a very classic. You only use it if it fits your narrative type of thing. Like this is really like the definition of that. Like if somebody sucks, you're just like, all right, well, they weren't very good. That's disappointing. But like they literally haven't even played a game like this season yet. This is just a scrimmage prospect tournament. And if someone does well, then you can be like, oh, look, they're great. Like that's really like what a lot of this is going to be used for. And it should be that's kind of like where I like, even kidding aside, that's kind of where I stand on it. Like, it's really hard for me to be like, oh, I'm completely out on fill in the blank or like a positional group or like, Cossa or whatever off of 3 games in September. Like that's just really difficult for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we're coming from. I mean, while again, we're done with the Cossa part of the conversation, but just to put the final nail in it, like, yeah, he was disappointing this weekend, but don't write him off because he played poorly in the prospects tournament. Like, look to see what he does in the regular season before you start passing any kind of judgment.
Where he's playing consistently against everybody who's like actually on his level. And and again, like to your point, last year he started off slow and turned it around as the year went along as well. And if he's gonna, deal with a promotion in that, and like goalie development is so weird. Like it's really unlike any position in all of sports, like how it works. It's so non-linear. Like, yeah,
exactly.
It's really hard for me to be as disappointed as some people were about
it. Yes. Anyway, Scotty, let's move on to some of the things that we did like. We've talked 15 minutes about what we didn't like. I thought Nate Danielson was great all weekend. He did not play, rather, in the final game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That was just a management thing. He's not hurt or anything, but he looked great. He had I believe he had a couple assists in that first game against Dallas. And he showed up twice on the score sheet against the Columbus Blue Jackets in that huge blowout game, 10-7, and blowout's not the right word I'm trying to use, but shootout, like just
shootout.
Yeah. Absolutely crazy. 3 assists for him in that game. I thought Nate Danielson, in fact, I was kind of surprised with, how good he looked coming into his first prospects tournament playing again. We talk about it, like varying degrees of hockey experience. You have some guys there again, like Elmer Soderblom, who have a pretty substantial at this point, sample size of playing professional hockey. And Danielson goes out there and probably outperforms Elmer Soderblom, who I thought looked pretty good in his own right, at least in the offensive zone. So Danielson, I was surprised, and I was very pleased with his performance.
Yeah, not gonna, if I say what I said about Cossa, I kind of have to say the same thing and walk the same line with the good performances too. But
no. Fit your narrative.
Well, no, I think that with him, that one's much more of it. Like, I'm not going to look at the results too much for anybody, good or bad. It's a lot of like eye test analysis, because that's kind of erases the small sample size and of the weekend. And I think that with him, just watching him out there, like he's a confident skater, which it was very noticeable very early on. To your point, like he didn't look overmatched out there, like he didn't belong on the ice. He was not that he's like the best skater on the ice, but he's a confident skater. He did not look out of place at all. And so I think with, as his development continues, it was really nice to see, first glimpse of him in the organization, see him go out there and look, I don't know, at home against other top prospects. It was nice.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he looked, like you said, at home against other top prospects for sure. And, there was Toronto Maple Leafs, not so much, although we didn't play against them. But the Columbus Blue Jackets have one of the deepest prospect pools in the NHL right now. So watching him go out there and put 3 assists up on the board against that pools was pretty exciting to see. But again, like you said, you can't take too much away. You just sit back and you enjoy it, and you go, okay, that's cool. That's cool.
Right.
That he's doing good. Because again, you can't make too deep of observations on anything. Like that's prospects tournament, baby. Just sit back and enjoy.
That is the prospects tournament.
Let's see who else we got on here. Riley Sawchuk caught me off guard, kind of coming out of nowhere, and was just really freaking good, I thought, all weekend long. In fact, in the game against Toronto, he even got top line minutes in that game as well. He had a goal and an assist against the Columbus Blue Jackets prospects, and then he had 3 assists and was a +2, the only plus on the entire team against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, you don't put too much stock in a plus-minus, but it is an interesting little fact that he was the only plus on the entire team. Riley Sawchuk, just a little bit of a surprise. I didn't expect anything out of him coming into the weekend. And, we get one of these guys every single year that really perform well. He was obviously, they signed him from an AHL on an AHL contract back in February. So like there's very little in terms of expectation with him.
Yeah, man. He looked solid. I think that he's another one where, like, okay, he looked solid in the prospects tourney. So now I'm very interested in how he looks in the regular season against people that, again, like everybody he faces will be on his level guaranteed. So he definitely raised some eyebrows. I think he was one of the standouts of the weekend. And I don't know how much people are like expecting out of him long-term within the organization, but I think in the short term, turn it around and see what he does here in a few weeks.
Okay, let's take another quick break while we're transitioning to our next guy. Then when we come back, we will finish up by talking about Marco Kasper, Cross Hannes, and anyone else that Scotty has on his mind. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Where are my overlays, man? I am messing this up. Here we go. We got it, boys.
Monday, man. It's all right.
Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are doing our biggest takeaways from the Prospects tournament. I thought Cross Hannes had a really good, the last 2 games in particular, I really liked what I saw to him. He had some flashes in the first game. I believe he had an assist in the first game. I'm trying to think back all the way to Friday, man. My memory doesn't.
No, I think you're right.
But I liked, again, what I saw out of Cross Hannes, especially considering he was hurt a lot for, at the end of the season and even into the offseason. He had 2 goals against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then he had, just double checking my stats, 2 goals and an assist against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So his goal scoring really showed out in those last 2 games. And I mean, that's the thing that we saw last year in the Prospects tournament, is not only his ability to set up his teammates, but to put the puck in the back of the net. I mean, honestly, guys, if you're not paying attention to Cross Hannes, you really should. If it weren't for his injury last year, he'd be on a lot more people's radars, like higher up. Like, he is one of those dark horse candidates to, like, maybe that's a little probably saying, I think that's probably a bridge too far to say he's a dark horse candidate to make the team out of training camp. But, he's going to be pushing in the next couple of years, I think.
I think he's a dark horse to be like a injury fill-in at some point this season. I don't think out of camp. I think that would be a little bit of a stretch, but it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to me if, in March, if we're like 3 or 4 men down, to see him get a look.
Yeah, I fell in love with him last year, and then he just kind of fell off people's radars. There's that word again, because he got injured. So he was really great, and I remember he had like 30. I don't want to misquote here. Let me double check and pull up his stats, but he was really good in his time with Grand Rapids prior to the injury.
He was great this weekend, man. He was another one. You just talk about like.
Yeah, 17 points in 30 games, so over half point a game in Grand Rapids in his first professional season.
Yeah, he's just another guy like this weekend. And he got results as well, but even just like the results aside, you look at it and you're just like, all right, this is like clearly one of the better forwards on the ice for the Wings, like every single game. So yeah, he looked great.
Yeah, yes, he did. I enjoyed him. And then Alexander Doucette had a pretty good game against Columbus himself, as a guy who was signed off of, out of an AHL club in the offseason. He was absolutely kind of been one of those guys to keep your eyes on, late bloomer. We mentioned him a little bit the other day, and he looked pretty good against the Toronto Maple Leafs, or the Columbus Blue Jackets, with a goal and an assist in that game as well. So again, but like, it's cool to see these guys play and like do well, but it all resulted in 0 wins, poor defense, poor goaltending,
right? And
all that leads to nothing because none of it really matters.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that I think that he looked good too. He had a couple of really nice plays in game 1 as well, and then I think he had a bad turnover as well. But like, everybody had a bad turnover on Friday. But yeah, I agree with you, and I think that to me, like, is a very underrated part of the Prospects tourney. Like, everybody loves to talk about the top prospects that are there and getting a look at them and seeing how they look and whatnot, and like the new blood that you just drafted, etc. But giving an opportunity and a spotlight to some of these other guys that were like signed off of AHL deals or whatnot, or still on ELCs, like that's kind of a cool part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, last year, so Alexander Doucette played with 2 different teams last year. He played 34 games with the Val d'Or. I'm not even going to pronounce it. It's very French. He had
you nailed it.
53 points, 27 goals, and 26 assists in 34 games with Val d'Or. And then with the Halifax Mooseheads, which I do know how to pronounce, he had 31 goals and 31 assists for 62 points in 36 games. So he had a monster year, late bloomer, and then they signed him to an entry-level contract over with the Detroit Red Wings. He's going to be a guy you guys want to keep an eye on, because he could be a very exciting prospect for the Red Wings. Yeah. So,
yeah,
but, I mean,
this is someone to keep an eye out for sure.
This is what it sounds like when you try to break down Prospects tournament. I mean, like,
yeah, it's just, it's very, like, we saw what we saw. We got to talk about the elephants in the room and then the people that had really bad performances. But it's just, it's very grain of salty. I don't want,
that's exactly it. Like, you just can't.
Can't. I think it's it's impossible. You know, there were some people out there that were taking a lot of stock into these games, and I just you can't do that, man.
Yeah, and you just can't. And I don't want to fall into that trap myself.
Right, yeah. So it's tough to walk that line of like, hey, let's get excited about the players that did really well, but also not freak out about the players that did bad. It's a very difficult line to walk for sure.
I mean, like, and unfortunately, the biggest takeaway that we can have from this, and again, it's not like a huge takeaway. Again, it's just like the Sebastian Cossa stuff. He was just so lackluster that it is of note. Like how 5 goals in 5 minutes, and then 6 goals the next game. And then obviously his first
goal. He struggled mightily. Like, I'm not trying to make it sound like, oh, it's just like not a big deal at all. We just shouldn't care about it. Like he struggled mightily.
He struggled to the point where you almost have to look at it and go, wait, should I be worried about this?
Right.
Whereas like other players, they have a bad game. You're like, who cares? It's the prospects tournament.
Right. I don't want to just like dismiss like his poor performance and be like, oh, this doesn't matter at all. I don't want to make it sound like that. But you know, if he goes out there and looks similar to this in GR, that's when the sirens will go off for me. Like that's just my point is I want to see him either do really well or struggle in the regular season before I like actually start worrying.
Yep. I'm right there with you, man. Let's see. Do you want to talk about, you know, the Mike Babcock thing of it all?
I mean, sure, man. We don't see, you know, there's not any crazy analysis behind it. It's just weird. Like the whole, it's the Simpsons gif where the guy walks into the restaurant, takes his hat off, then picks the hat back up off the rack and walks out. Like,
yeah.
You know what
Homer's
I mean?
Dad, by the way. That's Homer's dad. That did that in the gif. But
yeah, it's just it's wild.
Well, it's like surprise. He is who we thought he is.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the reports are wild. The Blue Jackets and Babcock denied, like, or like somewhat denied, like some of them. So like, I'm not trying to get in the middle of like the, you know, he said, she said, like the hearsay stuff about it, like whatever. I wasn't in the room, but you know, all the rumors about like the cell phone like situation and how, you know, the players were like, he's going through our phones. And one player said he was like going through his phone for a while, like just going through his entire phone. But then, yeah, the Blue Jackets were like, oh, you know, he was just asking them to find like a picture of their family or whatever. So like, who knows what happened? But at the end of the day, he must have made some people really uncomfortable. Because like, do you know how crazy it is to sign a contract with a team and then like have it be so weird? Like, and so I don't even know what other word to use. Because again, I'm not in there. I don't know how he made the people feel. But like have such an uncomfortable situation where like you have to get fired before you coached a game there because like, you know what I mean? Like that's just, he must have really rubbed people the wrong way is really, I guess, my take.
It's just so bizarre. And the thing is like, if it wasn't Mike Babcock, would this have been a fireable offense? I don't know. He was skating on such thin ice already because of the allegations that came out against him in his time in Toronto. And then like all the stuff that Johan Franzen came out and said, like he was already skating on thin ice coming back to the NHL already. There were so many people who were just on the edge of their seats ready to get rid of him. And then for this to come out and like, at first, okay, I was like, Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau, your captain and your star, came out and publicly defended this guy in a PR statement. Right. So like you gotta take that with a grain of salt, but it was just the whole thing is bizarre. Obviously, we'll never know the full truth as to what happened because they'll never let us know the whole truth. But for him to go from, outcast the NHL, climbing his way back in, just to immediately get ousted again for just being like weird, like even inappropriate or not, it's just a weird thing to do. Like if you want to get to know, because the original thing that came out on the Spit and Chicklets podcast was that he like was rifling through the players' phones in an attempt to, like, he wanted to get to know them. So he wanted to like see their photos. That's what Spit and Chicklets reported. Or no, I'm sorry, reported's not the right word. That's what they were saying.
Yeah.
They were saying that like they heard it from players, whatnot. It's all just like up in the air. But if that is true, like if that were true, that's so bizarre. You want to get to know your players, take them out to dinner. Like it's such a weird thing to do.
Yeah, it is. And like, that's my point is like, like we weren't in the room. We don't know what happened, but like at the end of the day, the objective truths are this dude did not coach a game for them. And after signing a contract to be their head coach, like they like he gets fired before that. That hasn't happened. Like that doesn't happen often. That's not like a common occurrence. Like no matter what happened with the cell phone thing is kind of like irrelevant in terms of like the overall outlook of the situation. Like he rubbed people the wrong way so much in like 3 months that
got an
he was the head
NHLPA
coach there
investigation
for a summer. And like I saw somebody tweeted out, I wish I could give credit, I don't remember the account's name, but somebody tweeted out like Babcock retires or like leaves whatever Columbus in top 10 in franchise history and wins because they've only had like 11 head coaches and 2 of them have 0. So like he's technically like a top 10 like winning coach in Blue Jackets history. But yeah, man, it's just a weird, like he is who he is, man. I think, you know, he's obviously one of the more winningest coaches in the modern era of the NHL, and certainly here in Detroit, like did, you know, led great teams. But I think it's a situation where, again, I don't know the guy, but I feel like it's probably a situation where the game has passed him by, and his style probably just isn't well reciprocated these days.
Yeah, and he's certainly something.
He is certainly something. I think that's a good way to put it.
The whole thing was just so bizarre and almost laughable. Almost.
I chuckled.
I chuckled for sure. But anyways, that does it. Well, training camp starts this week. We have a couple more episodes to get you, kind of a couple off-season episodes to get you guys this week, because I don't think training camp starts till Wednesday or Thursday, and then we can talk. Then we'll have news to give you guys as the week goes on. But until then, it'll just be. Then we'll be back.
We're back to 5 a week.
We are back to 5 a week. God save our souls. Yeah, there you have it. Back with a new episode tomorrow, and then Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday, and then Friday.
That was great, man.
Because we're back to 5 days a week, Scotty.
So do I just forget that you used to do that every Sunday? You used to list off every day of the week that we were going to provide an episode?
Unless we decide to skip for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, then they wouldn't get one. This is great. This is
Scotty wants to leave so bad.
This is awesome.
Scotty's on the edge of his seat waiting to say "we ball." It'd be a shame if I just hit the end card on him.
Do it. We ball.
I thought about muting your mic as you did that.
You wouldn't dare.